Back to Johannesburg now. It's been another big week in the state capture inquiry. Former President Jacob Zuma's son, Duduzane, has agreed to give testimony before Judge Zondo. Deliberation over whether to allow those implicated to cross-examine witnesses were finalized this week. Duduzane Zuma has been granted permission to cross-examine, but a request by the Guptas has been denied. For more on this discussion, I'm joined by governance and anti-corruption consultant Peter Goss. Peter, thanks for your time as always. I want to start off with those decisions about the cross-examination. Duduzane Zuma granted permission to cross-examine while the Guptas have been denied, and Judge Zondo saying that's based on their unwillingness to return to South Africa. Give us your analysis of those decisions.
My worry about the Commission at the moment is the fragmentation of the evidence. Yes, calling people to give evidence in the maximum of our law of letting the other side be heard based on a pre-maxim of he who alleges must prove is important. I'm not so sure that he who has alleged is anywhere near proving. So to be calling people to give exculpatory evidence at this point in time sounds somewhat premature to me. So it seems to me we have anecdotal evidence being presented and we expect an immediate response for it. So as a forensic practitioner, in having been involved in commissions of inquiry, I'm quite perplexed by the mannerism of presentation of the case. What do you do in a case of this nature, even in a commission of inquiry? You lead the evidence of all witnesses in relation to each count. You then lead the evidence of supporting witnesses to that particular count. We call it corroborate evidence. You then allow the defense to cross-examine. In this case, you cross-examine subject to also having given evidence because it's a commission of inquiry. Well, what we have here is a list of allegations being posed by various witnesses through oral testimony, one form of witness of evidence. The other two forms are documentary evidence and real evidence. I'm grappling with where's the documentary evidence and the real evidence that the implicated witness is supposed to defend. So we're dealing with what we call lots of anecdotal evidence as opposed to substantiated evidence corroborated by several witnesses, several documents, and several pieces of evidence that indicate what exactly is the case of the presenters against the parties implicated.
So what I hear you saying is that because there's so many people testifying to different occurrences or different relationships, that those aren't bringing together a solid picture and that they're not supported by documentary evidence. Is that correct?
And what we'd call real physical evidence. Evidence takes three shapes. Yeah. Oral testimony, which they're giving right now. Evidence takes the shape of documentary evidence to corroborate. And evidence takes the form of physical and real evidence.
So is there any sense that that's still to come, or do you find that that's vacant at this stage?
I think it's patchy, and I doubt that it's still to come. And I'll tell you what my experience is and why I believe it might be patchy, is because as you present a concern, an allegation, as it may be, you would see it through to the end for the defending party, the implicated party, to explain their perspective on it in cross-examination, for example, or first of all, in evidence in chief, and then cross-examination because of the commission of inquiry. Okay. So I think that we are jumping the gun for every bit of allegation raised, even speculative allegations, even allegations about somebody was in a room when somebody else said something and walked into the room. That is not implicating other than to say somebody was in a room. Yes. And somebody stepped into another room. For example, they say former President Jacob Zuma stepped into a room during Fakey Mentor's engagement with the Guptas. That's stepping into the room. All it does is place him in the room. Yes. I don't know that it places him at the center of all the discussions they had.
Yeah. So I'm glad you bring that up because Judge Zondo also asked that former President Jacob Zuma answer to some of the allegations made against him that implicate him in state capture. And he has returned, so said, he doesn't feel that he has been implicated, which comes to exactly what you're saying now. Do you feel that he's then fair in saying, well, despite the testimony and what you say, the anecdotal testimony by those who've testified, he hasn't been implicated via hard evidence?
What is the hard allegation? The hard allegation is the state has been captured through corruption by a family and other business people, together with a president and other political party players. Well, we need to see the hard evidence of that so that a complete response can be given to what is inculpatory evidence, so a person can exculpate themselves, giving their side of the story. So it's kind of jumping the gun after the first time you say, I think X stole, and then X comes to the party and says, sorry, I didn't steal, here's my side of the story. It's like placing the burden of proof on the defending party, on the implicated party. You know, the burden of proof is on he who alleges. He who alleges must prove.
Okay. So what also came up this week is that former President Jacob Zuma spoke on Wednesday at a university and essentially said there has been no state capture. And the implications of what that means about him having called this inquiry. How do you see that fitting into where we are when we were sort of I think Tuesday was day 12, so very early days yet. But what does that say about his opinion of the inquiry and the work it's doing?
I wouldn't want to comment on his opinion about the inquiry, which will always be defensive. I want to comment on the question of, is state capture a pertinent matter for us in South Africa at this moment? It is a pertinent matter, and it extends far beyond one family and one politician. Let's start at that point in time. We just saw a week ago an international company yet again decided to pay back certain funds in relation to consulting fees in this SARS inquiry, for example. We saw this also with another international company paying back fees to a parastatal in relation to services not delivered and payments made in advance. And how do you secure those funds other than through a form of state capture, which is lobbying for a positive position so that you can benefit yourself. Sometimes lobbying so that the rules can be broken so that you can benefit yourself, as the concept state capture developed in Russia from that particular perspective. So state capture is a burning platform, but I think state capture is a burning platform across various players in business and politics. Not just a family and just a person. And I think right now we're focusing a lot on just a family and just a person. And the terms of reference of the commission of the inquiry are way more than a family and a politician. Any other organization involved in state capture activities. And we're not seeing enough strength around the matters of these companies that are paying back funds to state organs, to organs of state, without being paid, without having delivered any services. So the inquiry is not getting to the depth of its scope.
And you don't think that perhaps, especially South Africans in general, might be focusing in on one family, purely because there has been so much reporting and so much media coverage that there seems to be these glaringly obvious incidences of corruption. And if we can't get to the bottom of those singled out incidences, then how are we ever going to get to the bottom of what you say is a much broader scope of state capture?
Yes. My real concern is that we're handling this matter rather casually around the loose concept state capture, which in itself is not a crime. It's a loose term used to coin corruption in various guises, even fraud and other maladministration. I think what's very important here, and goes back to my analogy on how an investigation is conducted. You conduct it to collect relevant and reliable evidence. With relevant and reliable evidence, you present in an organized manner, and at some point in time, the implicated party has the opportunity to put forward their side of the story and to cross-examine witnesses in the context of the Commission of Inquiry.
And just quickly, sorry to interrupt you there, because that's quite important. Do you think that the Guptas should have a fair chance via video link, as they've requested, to cross-examine? Or do you think that the decision by Judge Zondo to say, well, if you've left the country, then you've sort of given up your right to cross-examine?
I think that the evidence from the state capture investigators and evidence leaders needs to be a lot more substantial, a lot more relevant, a lot more reliable, a lot more complete, a lot more authentic, a lot more convincing to the presiding official, the fundamental elements of evidence, as I've just pointed them out to you, in order to empower even a ruling like saying you may not give evidence via video conference. I think it's inappropriate to give evidence via video conference. You should come before the court and give evidence through oral testimony, not at your convenience when the subject of being implicated. But what is going to be responded to is rather shallow. So not enough strong evidence has been delivered to give this response. Duduzane Zuma's witness testimony, whenever we reconvene, is going to be a testimony about the fact that he met with Jonas. They may have not sat in a hotel, may have not ended up in the home of the family, the Guptas, may or may not have discussed a particular recognition of Jonas in exchange for supporting the Guptas. I don't know that it's complete evidence of corruption. I'm certain it's not. I believe it's evidence of a sensational concept called state capture, which I again say does exist, is hot and present in our country even now and ongoing. But I'm not sure this inquiry is proving state capture, corruption and fraud. It might be proving this loose concept, the sensational concept, state capture, at some loose level. But I'm hearing lots of anecdotal evidence from which we must draw analogies, analogical evidence too. Analogical evidence, anecdotal evidence are not evidence that's admissible in our courts.
Not the same thing. Well, thank you very much for that in-depth analysis. That was governance and anti-corruption consultant Peter Goss talking to us about the events of the state capture inquiry this past week.